A big welcome to everybody who's joining us here today for this session on leading across an integrated healthcare system. We're really looking forward to spending some time together. Next slide, please. Over the next 75 minutes or so, you'll hear from 4 fantastic speakers who are working across North and Mid Hampshire ICP and Wessex AHSN, and they're going to share their learning and experience of cross-system leadership over recent months. There'll be an opportunity for some question Q&A with these speakers, and we'll use the chat functionality for that. And we'll also have some time for some small group conversations to reflect a little bit on what you've heard about leadership across systems and talk to others about that. I'll kick off first with a few bits of housekeeping. Next slide, please. So firstly, we have subtitles available for anyone who needs them today. If you'd like to see the subtitles, please click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the page. And Beth will also add some instructions into the chat now to help you find that if you need it. Only one of our breakout groups will have that functionality. So if you'd like to be in that group, again, please send a chat message to Beth and she'll sort that out for you. Secondly, we're recording today's session and we're going to make snippets of the session available for key members who can't make the time today. If possible, it would be really great if you could have your videos on, and this is particularly helpful when we move to breakout groups, as it'll just improve the quality of the conversation that you can have. I know not everyone can, but if you're able to, that would be brilliant. And we will be using the chat box today to invite you to share any comments you've got, and as we go through hearing from the speakers, you can capture some questions. So do feel free to use that if you'd like to. We've also had a bit of people, some people comment in and starting some conversations on Twitter, so if you prefer that, you can see the hashtag on the top right-hand corner, hashtag QEvent2020. Next slide, please. Just briefly in terms of how we'll work together, this is an interactive session, and we've designed some activities to support you to have some good conversations in today's session. We want it to be a safe and supportive space for people to share as openly as they can with one another, and we just kind of want to recognise up front that we know that as we're in this second wave, this is a tough time for many people. So I hope you find this space helpful and restorative. Some of the session today will be about listening, being curious about other people's experience and what you might take from it. But there'll also be time to reflect, process your own thoughts and help other people process theirs. Next slide, please. So we're going to run a short icebreaker just to help everyone get present in the room and warmed up. And think briefly about the topic of cross-system collaboration. I'm going to hand over to Andy now, who will talk us through this.
Brilliant, thank you, Tracy. We're going to be using the annotate function on Zoom, which means that you'll be able to use your mouse to draw onto the Zoom screen. So we're going to be asking you 2 questions for you to think about and then plot yourself on the screen. And don't worry, we're going to start with a practice run. So at the top of the screen, where it says you're viewing Team 7's screen, there is a drop down to view options. So if you could please click on that and then select the annotate function. If for some reason you don't have it enabled on your Zoom account, please don't worry, you can type your responses to the questions into the chat. If you click on the annotate function now, you'll hopefully see a menu come up with a range of tools. I can see people. So please click on the stamp and choose one of the options. So I think there are stars and hearts and various different options to use. Great that everyone is having a practice run. Fiona, can you move on to the next slide, please? If we could move on, yeah, that'd be great if we can move on to the next slide. Great, thank you. I think people are already having a practice. That's great. If you could place a stamp in one of the quadrants on the screen, lots of stars and hearts. There's also, I think, a question mark and a tick and a cross. Brilliant. That's great. You all are very prepped for this. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Fiona. Fantastic. So we're asking the very broad question, which emoji comes to mind when you think about cross-system working? So you can hopefully see 4 emojis. There's the top right, you absolutely love it. Bottom right, you like it, potentially interested to know more. Top left, you're not sure about it. And bottom left, please don't talk to me about it. So please answer the question by placing a stamp in the quadrant of your answer. I'll give everyone about 20 seconds. Looks like we're sort of split between the love it and the not sure at the moment. So hoping by the end of the session that some of you will have moved quadrants a little bit. Fantastic. Fiona, if you could clear the screen and then move us on to the second and final question. This is a little bit more around personal reflection. So again, which emoji comes to mind when you think about how well you personally work with others across your system? Again, top right, you love it. Bottom right, you like it. Top left, you're not sure. And bottom left, please don't talk to me about it. Lots of people in the like, which is nice. Very glad to see not many answers in the please don't talk to me about it. So brilliant. Hopefully you'll have a chance later on in the breakouts to have good conversations to talk about how well you work with others. I hope everyone's had a chance to have a go. Fiona, if you could please clear the screen. Thank you very much for playing along with that slightly silly and creative start to the session. So I'm going to hand back to Tracy.
Thank you very much, everyone, for playing around with the whiteboard. Maybe a tip that you might be able to use in some of your Zoom meetings. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to our speakers for today, who are going to introduce themselves and share their experience of reading and learning across the system. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So as the speakers move through the presentation, if you have questions that you'd like to put to them at the end, please do pop these into the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box as we go and pulling a few out. And we'll get through as many of those questions as we can. Lovely. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alex to kick us off.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see so many people and some familiar names as well. My name's Alex Whitfield, and I am the Chief Executive of Hampshire Hospitals, and I'm here with three amazing colleagues to talk about leading and learning across North and Mid Hampshire. So if you move on to the next slide, please. So as I said, I'm the hospital chief executive, but I'm here with Nicola Decker, who is a GP and a clinical chair for North Hampshire CCG, and also with two colleagues from the Academic Health Science Network, Nicola Bent, the deputy chief exec and director of innovation, and Philip Adanton, who's the associate director of Insight. And we've really loved working with the AHSN on a couple of projects that we just want to share a little bit with you about. Next slide, please. So just to position us, for those that don't know where we are, so North and Mid Hampshire covers a population of about 570,000. The partners we work with, the hospital obviously, and then Southern Health for our community mental health provider, county council, primary care networks, the CCGs, the ambulance service, and district and borough councils. And when we were responding to the challenges of COVID-19, we really thought about how do we make rapid decisions about health and care across the system. And for anyone that was in the more left-hand side of that little chart earlier, I really hope that these few minutes will convince you of the benefits of working across the system, because we're going to show you some of the results of what we feel we've achieved recently. We really wanted to lead together and to capture the learning as we went along so we could build on it and didn't require a pandemic in order to make amazing things happen. So this presentation describes what we've achieved, how we did it, and what we've learned. Next slide, please. So what does good cross-system collaboration look like? Next slide. So I'm going to hand to Nicola Decker, who's, as I say, a GP, and she pulled out some of these stories and she's going to tell you a little bit about what good system working looks like. Nicola.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everybody. Thank you for making the time to be together today. Yes, you know, when trying to motivate teams adapt in a pandemic, there was a moment where on a random Tuesday, I got back and over dinner said to my husband, described the events of the day. And he said, gosh, you should really tell the team that you meet with so regularly what's been happening. And it was in a long email that I said to everybody, this was a day in my life. And these are the 4 stories that captured some of the chemistry and magic of togetherness that had happened as a result of everybody having a common purpose. They were simple stories, but collectively could not have happened without everybody working together. you can see them. The first was an 80-year-old lady who had had a fall. The paramedics are amazing in our system, but they'd not just sorted her, they'd rung me to say that they'd sorted care for her husband through the Princess Royal Trust for Carers. The other was a really rapid response to a profoundly anemic young man, where the haematologist was taking her child to school and said, "Oh, I'm just busy doing a school run, but hang on, I'll ring him tomorrow and sort a transfusion." And it was all so person-centered and so responsive. The other was just a sense of teamwork for a frail lady dying in a nursing home, where at a WhatsApp call, I could speak to a palliative care team who could help me. And the same with the palliative end-stage COPD patient, where a nurse just came in and said, they're really struggling. And there was a sense that we were all focused on the same common goal. And whilst that's so easy to describe in the abstract, each of these stories personified them. And in sharing them with the board, the Integrated Care Partnership Board, I hoped it would encourage them to do more of the same and keep at it, because so often the theory doesn't translate into action. And I hope that this would motivate them. And I think it did, didn't it, Alex?
It absolutely did, Nicola. And I think really important, all of these patients got amazing care without coming into a hospital. And we're all of us in North Midlands committed to providing as much as we possibly can close to where people live. Thank you, Nicola. For those of you who prefer data, the next slide has a bit of numbers and data. Oh, no, sorry, it's about our staff. Sorry, it's how our staff felt about this. And I think this was really important. And the quote that really spoke to me was that people felt they got permission to implement change that would make a difference to patients. They only had to worry about the right thing for the patients. And we'd taken away some of the traditional barriers. We'd built the bonds of trust and familiarity, and that people had been willing and to take opportunities to make change happen quickly. So we wanted to start with the results. And then I think we've got data on the next slide. Yeah, so this is the data slide that is about discharging patients from hospital. So way back on the 13th of March, we had 61 beds with officially delayed patients in it in the hospital. And we were really struggling to provide good care for patients that needed care because we were full so often. And I know that's not an unusual story. But through this, all the changes that came in through the pandemic, we hit a low of just 7 patients. Who didn't need to be in hospital but were still there. That was astonishing. You know, we've said so many times that this is something we wanted to change, and we actually managed to do it during this period. And even in the kind of, you know, as things get slightly more exhausting, as we're continuing to fight COVID, but also get on top of a whole load of other things as well, we've still maintained most of that improvement. So we wanted to start with the results. Move on to the next slide. How we made it happen. So hopefully that's got your attention. So in terms of how we made this happen, Philippa's going to tell you a little bit about the how.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. So the next section gives you some examples of the ways in which the system came together to learn together and to lead the collaborative change that we saw. And this slide provides just one example of how the system went about this. So just after the start of lockdown, system leaders designed and participated in 2 large virtual workshops facilitated by the AHSN to provide a space for staff to reflect on ways of working in response to the pandemic and to identify together their shared priorities going forward. They thought about 4 questions in relation to the changes that they'd seen. They thought about what they wanted to keep, what they wanted to stop, how changes had been implemented, and what was new that they wanted to understand more about to enable them to plan going forward. And despite the situation at the time, we had really good participation in those events. So 28 of the board members of the ICP attended meetings, and 55 senior clinicians attended meetings in the evening to share their views. The diagram on the right of this slide shows some of the key themes that emerged from those conversations. So in the coloured boxes are the strongest themes that emerged. And as you can see, there was a desire to continue collaborative working, and that critical to that was perceived to be the empowered leadership that Alex has just referred to. So clinicians and professionals across the system enabled to lead and to take decisions. And linked to that, agile, rapid decision making that was focused on solutions and that was benefiting from this momentum to change that was present in the system. And leaders identified 2 areas in which they wanted to find out more about impact and capture learning from implementation. One of those was in the transformation of rapid discharge and working in an integrated way to help people out of hospital quickly into the right setting. And as Alex has described, the results of that were very visible. And the second was remote consultations with patients. And so this approach to gathering rapid insights was conducted over just a few months between April and June this year, and was perceived to have a number of benefits for the system, including giving people a shared appreciation, giving that space to do that, to encourage the culture of learning, and also to engage a range of voices from the system in shaping the approach going forward. I'm going to hand to Nicola again now to describe the next example of ways in which the system came together. Nicola, Decker, over to you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. There was, if you're at the beginning of the pandemic, which is the time we're in, there was a sense of people wanting to do the right thing, and as we said earlier, feeling really empowered. But what we recognized was there wasn't a forum for people to gather together naturally. We were divided as organizations. And so we quickly set up a Friday system Zoom, and it was just at the beginning when Zoom was becoming popular, and how I wish I had shares in Zoom. And people joined Zoom on a Friday, and we set up a system call saying that if we don't talk to each other, we're not going to be able to do this. And there was such interest from across a range of the whole system in health and social care, and we got together regularly, and in doing that we set up a forum where we would work through issues on a weekly basis, openly talking to each other rather than in traditional meetings. And that became our agile version of working through issues. And it was a safe space where people could just talk to each other and, more than anything, get to know people in this digital world as we are now. That's continued throughout the whole year, and it's become a place where stuff gets done and people have a permission to do good things. Gradually, people have shifted to taking more of a system perspective than an organizational perspective. And gradually we've brought the patient and person voice into it as well. And we feel like we're growing an army of system-facing person ambassadors who can help hold us to account and also help us do stuff. And with that in mind, as we were going through the pandemic, we recognized that there were an awful lot of people waiting for elective care. And so we decided that one powerfully strong message would be to say to people, we're sorry they're waiting, we're on it, we're trying our best. And we did that with a few patients helping us to try and get the tone and the content right. It's light on detail, so for those of you who've also got long waiting lists, it doesn't tell you quite what we're doing. But we wanted to set the tone that was, as a group of system leaders, we're working together and we trust each other. And therefore, we will not fall out between each other about your wait. We're going to solve it together. And we put together a very short video, which we're going to show you now, which captured our togetherness, really.
We're sorry that our health and care services have been disrupted by the COVID pandemic.
We are working together as a health and care team
to address this.
We are working with you to prioritise what needs to be done.
Like everyone,
We are adapting the ways in which we work.
All our services are open.
But we need to work differently to keep everybody safe.
We are planning together
the winter and flu season ahead of us.
Our health, screening and immunisation services
are running normally again.
Thank you for your patience.
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 And for doing what you can to help.
Thank you. The interesting thing about that is the act of doing the video together was as powerful as the content, in that it was a shared demonstration of us learning to trust each other. And I think it was refreshing for all of us to just get together to do that. As time's gone on, we've then, of course, like you, faced the second wave. And I think that the biggest thing that has struck us is that we've had to continually adapt and try and sustain the hope and energy in the way we were working. It gave us an opportunity to try new things, and working together felt good. So in some ways, the changes have continued easily. So the get together, talk through stuff, work through stuff has continued. And that's been helpful. People have made that a priority because I think they can see that things get done there and trust grows. The adapting continuously, I think we've been stretched by that because the business as usual has been reinstated, as you know, and the truly trying to adapt on all fronts whilst trying to maintain elective care, screening, prevention, as well as deal with winter and urgent care has been a challenge for everyone. But the sense of we will adapt and we will do this together rather than blame each other, I believe has remained. Communicating is probably the thing I would add now, since we made the slides, is the need to keep communicating together and with each other. And I think we've really got better at that, in that we don't write emails. We tend to just pick up the phone, talk to each other, because guess what? We know each other now. And so communicating has become easier and, as you know, as important as ever. Next slide, please. And over to Nicola.
Thanks, Nicola. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the lessons for leadership and draw on some of the theory as we respond to another wave of this pandemic, but also tackle future periods of challenge in the health and care system. And as you've heard today, during the first wave of COVID, the AHSN worked with the North and Midlands system, along with a number of others across Wessex, to really capture rapid insights in terms of their response and also the changes that have been implemented. And it was evident from this work that there were a number of enablers that made these changes possible, and Nicola's just covered a few of those today, such as a local freedom to implement changes within national guidelines, with a top-down clarity and a bottom-up agency that was evident. Staff had more time to innovate, and there was a relative relaxation of the rules and a permissive air cover from the regulators to do so. But there are a number of barriers to sustaining some of these changes, and I've seen a couple of comments in the chat today to this effect. There are fears of widening of health inequalities, for example, around digital exclusion for some patients, and there are challenges around continued collaboration across organisational boundaries. And in this second wave, we really need the system to maintain that openness to the radical innovation that we saw in wave one, and rapidly learn from what made such a response possible. And that need to improvise and adapt, I think, will continue for the foreseeable future. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. As we started this work, along with others, we identified the importance of HiFit's work on responding to adaptive challenges, and the nature of leading when there aren't easy answers, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And this became our frame of reference throughout the Rapid Insight work. So just to provide a little more context to the work of HiFit's, he describes an adaptive challenge as one that can't be met by existing technical fixes or the usual repertoire of management responses. And he says that these challenges really require new approaches, innovation, and importantly, changes in the values and beliefs and assumptions of people and organisations. And he talks about adaptive challenges requiring adaptive responses. So this is about reducing the gap between the values that people stand for and the new reality that they face. And it creates a sort of internal contradiction and conflict. And this in turn can produce the leverage to really mobilise people to clarify what matters most and how to handle those trade-offs in the new reality. And to really get underneath the reality of the challenge requires the involvement of people from multiple vantage points. And you'll have heard from Philippa today, this is exactly what we've done with North and Mid Hants. And it's not just through the normal lines of authority. He also talks about mobilising people to tackle tough problems, and you'll clearly seen this in action during the presentation today. And he states that during a prolonged period of disruption, such as COVID, where there are dilemmas about adjustment or leaders need to really concentrate more of their efforts on mobilising adaptive work. So next slide, please. So there are 5 conditions that HiFITS talks about, which are shown on this slide. And as I walk through the next few slides, you'll see a number of little yellow and coloured post-it notes with points that came out of our work with systems. So firstly, he talks about framing the challenge as adaptive. So this isn't a technical fix. This is about an opportunity to really stimulate engagement and thinking. And you can see some examples there on the slide. Next slide, please. Secondly, he talks about giving the work back to the people and mobilising engagement across traditional boundaries and hierarchies. Next slide, please. The third element is around regulating the pressure for change while managing the risk of overload, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. Next slide, please. So the fourth element is around protecting the voices of leadership without authority. So these are individuals that can be closer to the detail and are able to really influence the attitudes and behaviours of people that need to be supported to change. And then finally, next slide, please. Avoiding distractions such as blaming others, jumping to conclusions or denying the nature of the challenge, and keeping a strong focus on adapting. So it's been clear really that in many ways the health and care system is on a one-way journey, and we won't really be able to get back to what was our normal before the pandemic. And there's going to be a long period of unprecedented disruption due to COVID, which is going to continue. So we think that those building adaptive capability in the way I've just described at this time will be best placed for this challenging future. And just to end, one of the quotes from HiFITS that I really like describes the first step to solving this adaptive challenge requires you to get off the dance floor and gain perspective from the balcony. So you're able to see that bigger picture, which is really key. And I think, as we know from experience, it's so easy and compelling to get caught up in the action. And to see that whole picture requires you to stand back and watch, even as you take part in the action that's being observed. And that sweet spot to me is about going back and forth between the dance floor and the balcony. And it's really only after you take the time to step back and see that bigger picture, you're then in a position to take action. So that's the end of our presentation. And I think I'm going to pass back to Tracy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today. It was really fantastic to hear your stories and your experience. And thank you also for agreeing to take part in the Q&A. There's been lots of questions coming through onto the chat, and I've just been pulling a few of those together. If we could move away from the slides into the spotlight feature, that would be great. We've got some virtual applause in the chat coming through. I'm going to start, if I may, with Philippa and Nicola Bent. There's been quite a few comments in the chat about kind of building personal connections and building trust through this. And that feeling like it's really central to some of the work that you did. Did you have that in spades across your system before you started, or was that something that you really built as you went along through this work? And kind of, is it still there, I guess, as we're into the second wave?
Philippa, do you want to start?
Okay, yes. So I think we were very privileged to have insights into how the system were thinking at various points in time through the pandemic. And I guess what we provided is a space for people to have those, to share the reflections with each other and to appreciate where everybody was at a point in time. I think the work to build the trust and collaboration was the system was working on that all of the time. You know, described some ways in which they came together. Nicola Decker's Zoom meetings seem to be a really crucial component of that work. So I think we were observers and helping people to have the space to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think across Wessex, I think we are very lucky that we have strong foundations, pre-existing relationships that go back a number of years. There's a lot of trust and confidence in the partners working collaboratively together. So I think we were very privileged in that regard. And I like to think that the foundations that we've built from the first phase of COVID certainly will continue into the second and what might potentially be, you know, an ongoing challenge for us in future as well. So yeah, I think we were very lucky in that regard.
One of the things that I think has been a really useful foundation for us is something Nicola and I were both involved in setting up only, you know, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, which is a leadership development program, which we've deliberately, we stole it from Frimley. We're not, you know, I'm not claiming the intellectual property, but we've had 30 people from across health, social care, police force. You know, we've had GPs, consultants, psychiatrists, managers, nurses, therapists, learning together, paramedic from the ambulance service. And what we've tried to do is set a culture of saying we really value everyone working together. This isn't just something the chief execs or the clinical directors or whatever need to do. We want everybody to recognise that we're all here for the same group of patients. Someone's put in the chat, it's, you know, we're all looking after the same people. Let's try and do it together. So I think we have, for a number of years now, we've been trying to send that message out kind of subliminally or in reality. But that's not to say it's perfect, you know, but I think it has been a bit of a long time in the making.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just, at the risk of over-egging it, trust is earned, isn't it? But I also think the experience of delivering something together builds more trust. So by way of encouragement, that if one can get a team of people to trust each other and do the undoable that they can't do individually, so they're needing to work together. What has been encouraging is our previously factions, they were difficult, just like all of you have had, are now working together better. And encouragingly, in North Hampshire, we've been ahead on setting up the COVID oximetry at home virtual wards. We've done COVID assessments in hubs in the community, which was ahead of others. And what I'm watching is empowered people just do more and more because they've realized they can, and they realize that working together is just much better than working alone. So for now, it's lasting. I dare say it will be fragile, and as senior leaders, we need to continue to create the culture where that's what we expect and that's how we behave for our shared patients. But I've been really encouraged that it's persisted right into the second wave, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. And there's been a few questions as well about kind of patient involvement. And I think it's fair to say that patient involvement hasn't always been the strongest, most positive story of this pandemic. You know, we've all heard examples of where that's been really tough and where that's fallen short of what we would want. There was also quite a lot of love in the chat for the video, which felt like a really nice example of a kind of honest, open dialogue with people about where things are at. I just wonder about your reflections around kind of what we've learned about patient involvement and how we can continue to do that better, particularly as we face potentially a fairly long winter ahead of us. I don't know who best to start with, maybe Alex or Nicola?
Should I just start, Alex, just watching them? I mean, at the beginning, we used our patient group for this work around the digital piece. So we got small groups of people together to ask them about their experience of change in consultation. So that was good. And I think they felt really empowered to be able to have a voice and to note that what they said made a difference. And Alex's hospital team was better than my community team at listening. So based on their feedback, the hospital made big changes to how they offer digital appointments. Primary care has been less good. But what we've done since then is we said, we are serving you. I hate the word user, but it's about you that we're doing this. And we've created fora where they can start to think system and help us problem solve. So only last night, we got the whole of the patient participation groups from North and Mid Hampshire to wrestle through some of the challenges around access, around delivering population health, around person-centered care. And what I'm watching is patient leaders grow, and it's moving from tokenism to them going, hey, I want to connect with the ambulance trust patient participation person. And I want to lead this, and what's really exciting is we're watching them drive it, and I think that's going to be the next stage of amazingness, because we need them so badly to give us rich feedback and to change things. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's always an area we can do more in, you know, involving patients in design of things rather than just asking them what they think once we've done it, sort of thing. So, but I think it has been quite an interesting moment in patient involvement. So I see comments about, you know, how well have we accessed minority groups or people who we don't always engage with. And we have been, in parallel as a system, we've been running an engagement process because we're part of the Health Infrastructure Programme, New Hospital Bill. And we did a lot of patient and public engagement during June, July and August, and we did it all on Zoom. And actually, we got better representation, particularly of people with disabilities and other long-term health conditions than we have had in comparable real life situations. And I think in some ways there's a democratization that comes from some of the electronic technology, and particularly the chat function allows people who maybe wouldn't stick their hand up in a big room, but they can really get involved in some of the debate. So I think it's been interesting, and I think that whole patient engagement thing is going to look quite different coming out of this. We need to know that there are digitally excluded people and how we engage those. Obviously, you know, we're not going to get everybody, but we do get different people who we didn't get everybody before, and you know, so I think it has been quite interesting. But the other bit I would say is our cancer, we moved all our cancer treatment off-site to one of the independent sector hospitals, and we had brilliant patient engagement in how to make that work for patients. And as a result, they absolutely love it at the moment. So yeah, we've had some specific examples that have worked really well.
Thank you so much. Somehow the time is running away with us. We only have a couple of minutes left before, it's been really fascinating before we move into breakouts. But I can't resist just asking you all one final question. It is a hard one, so you can answer as deeply or as lightly as you want, but there's been so many comments in the chat. People are just really interested in what you're saying, and I guess people asking questions ranging from, is it trust that unlocks it? Is it the fact that we sorted out some of the finance flows that has unlocked the way we could work, some of those stories that you mentioned at the beginning, Nicola? You know, if you had to take one thing away, what's the secret sauce that enabled us to work differently at the beginning of this pandemic and make some of those inspiring stories happen? Maybe I could just quickly run through you all and yeah, your initial reflections. Alex.
I would say, so the money did come up many times, that was an enabler, the fact that wasn't so much of an issue. And what the bit of work we've got to sort is actually working out whether I think the care we provided was probably more cost effective as well. So actually we shouldn't let the money get in the way. It's the fact that money's in the wrong pocket. But I do think that constant refrain, what's the right thing for the patient, what's the right thing for the citizen, you know, that's the bit that made the difference. And staff saying, all I have to worry about is what's the right thing for the person in front of me. That was the thing that really made the difference. And we should have been doing that anyway. So, yeah.
Yes, and I was going to say similar, Alex, so the empowerment of clinicians and professions to take those decisions. That was a very strong theme.
I think for me, just the beauty of having that common goal, the sort of strong focus on the individual person and the populations that we serve. I think that provides a clear objective for everyone, which has brought everybody together and enabled the work to be done in a really successful, person-centered way. So I think development of that, the new mindset, so that systemic thinking is at its core, is quite important as well. And being uncomfortable with the uncertainty, seeking out collaborative partnerships and conversations, asking questions and being curious and encouraging others to do the same. I think that's really important as we go on into this next phase.
Yes, I'd agree. Common purpose and trust.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And I just wanted to say, you know, as have so many people that are in this conference today, you guys have been working so incredibly hard this year. I don't know how you're all still standing, much less have the energy to come and be so generous with your time at sessions like these, where you share what you've done openly so people can learn from it. So a really huge thank you for that. And it's been really, really fascinating hearing hearing about your work.